This video is sponsored by Opera GX. The Opera GX browser is the world's first browser for gamers, specifically tailored for the gaming community as a whole. Opera GX is extremely useful because of GX Control. GX Control allows gamers to enhance performance on their PC while gaming and having their browser opened, getting rid of lag while playing games and listening to music. It's perfect if you want to keep a bunch of tabs open so you don't lose them, but you don't want your browser to hurt your gaming performance. The panel lets users limit their computer's CPU or RAM that they're willing to let the browser use, plus it's got a network limiter, limiting the network bandwidth used by Opera GX to gain performance in games and streams. By comparison, Google Chrome uses a ton of system resources. Opera GX also has Twitch and Discord integration. You can log into your Twitch account directly from the sidebar and get notifications when a streamer you follow goes live. There's other integrations, such as Facebook Messenger, Discord, and WhatsApp. Opera GX also has a ton of design and customization options. You can customize the browser with special themes, wallpapers, and colors. If you're worried about all the stuff you have saved in your current browser, GX comes with a quick import tool. Opera GX is also on mobile devices. GX Mobile is a great companion to the desktop version, especially since you can connect the two with the Flow feature, so you can send files, videos, links, and notes between browsers in a single click. There's also GX Corner on the start page, with my favorite feature, the game release calendar, as well as gaming news and free mobile games. If you want to support the channel, download Opera GX using the link below and write a comment with the hashtag InstalledGX, telling me what your favorite games are. I'll be sure to respond to all of the comments with that hashtag. Thank you Opera GX for sponsoring this video. Deathloop is on the horizon, and on the surface it appears to be a perfect blend of Arkane's modern titles. But with a marketing campaign that seems more focused on getting pre-orders than showing off gameplay and unique features, it's fair for people to be cautiously optimistic about the game. In this video, I'd like to take a look at a few of Arkane's games that I've played through recently, and see how they compare to the footage we have of Deathloop right now. As you'll come to see, I came out of this experience with very mixed feelings, and while I'm still hoping for the best with Deathloop, I am also prepared for the worst. Dishonored 1 is probably my favorite game I'll be discussing in this video for several reasons. Those being that the story is both written and delivered incredibly well, the level design is superb, and the abilities and mechanics that the player has at their disposal feel fantastic. When discussing the story of Dishonored, as well as the other games in this video, expect there to be spoilers. With that being said, why do I hold the story of Dishonored in such high regard? Because it was able to genuinely catch me off guard with its twists and turns, taking the mechanics of the central hub location, where I spent so much time interacting with the cast of characters, and turning my expectations against me. By the time the people of the Hound Pits pub betrayed me, I had spent over a dozen hours talking with them, completing side quests for them, and learning more about who they were in general. They shared secrets and confided in me, making me trust them as a result. And then, the game pulls the rug right out from under my feet. I would feel far differently about this plot twist had the character building up until that point been anything less than as stellar as it was. Arkane is capable of crafting amazing narratives, as we'll talk a bit more about later with Prey, but they're able to fail in that effort just as easily, such as in Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsider. This is why I'm concerned for the story of Deathloop, since the game has been positioned as this try whatever you want in each loop scenario, wherein we may not be given any central hub or many characters that exist beyond a few alternating lines of dialogue to make each loop feel fresh. When it comes to the level design of Dishonored, or rather Arkane games in general, I don't think it gets any better than the city of Dunwall. Whether you're traversing the city's main streets, back alleys, specific districts, or you're inside one of the many different types of buildings you can explore, everything feels not just alive, but tailored to your movement capabilities and powers. Nothing feels like it's been designed as just a video game level, but as a place that could actually exist. On top of that, each location you visit has numerous ways to get around, many of which are unlocked by completing quests for the aforementioned characters in the hub area, or the ones in specific districts. My favorite example of this is how Slackjaw from the Distillery District will provide you with an alternative route into your target's location for completing one quest for him, and then offer you another quest which allows you to avoid taking care of the targets yourself altogether. All of these different options and interconnecting routes really make the player feel like they're creating their own unique path throughout the game. From what we've seen of Deathloop, it's shaping up to expand on this idea tenfold. It looks as though players will have total autonomy over how they reach their destination, and that they'll be able to unlock different paths using the knowledge they gain from previous loops. Finally, there are the abilities in Dishonored, which offer both traversal and combat utility in equal measure. Where Blink allows players to move around the world quickly, it can also be used to evade enemies during combat, dodging an enemy swinging their sword at you, ending up behind them and landing your killing blow. There are also abilities considered more offensive to boot, such as Devouring Swarm and Wind Blast. Devouring Swarm summons a horde of plague rats which will surround your enemies and eat them alive. Wind Blast, on the other hand, which appears to have a very similar counterpart in Deathloop, will send a gust of wind at your enemies, knocking them into obstacles or off ledges. There are several other abilities in Dishonored, however they're more focused on stealth gameplay, whereas Deathloop as a whole seems more focused on going in guns blazing, albeit in a planned out and controlled manner. Between the myriad of guns at the player's disposal, as well as melee weapons, on top of the Dishonored-esque supernatural abilities, Deathloop's minute-to-minute combat appears to be in good hands. In keeping with the three main points of discussion for Dishonored 1, how does Dishonored 2 stack up to its predecessor and potentially influence Deathloop? In terms of story, I could never appreciate any of Dishonored 2. The main story, with Delilah coming back to Dunwall to reclaim her throne after being stuck in the void from the end of the original game's DLC, almost immediately killed any chance of immersion for me. While I could have missed some hints or notes in the DLC that she would find a way to escape the void, it felt more like a plot convenience than anything else. Additionally, there isn't much of a main hub for you to explore like there was in the first game, making it difficult to have a varied cast of characters to interact with. All we're really given is Megan Foster, and after a certain point in the game, Anton Sokolov. While it was nice to see Sokolov, Megan is a different story entirely. Her whole character hinges on this incredibly grating, forced mysteriousness and how she doesn't trust anyone. By the time she leaves us in Dunwall at the end of the game, revealing that she was part of the team that killed Jessamine, I was more thankful to be done with her character than I was surprised by this supposed twist in the story. This goes back to my concern with Deathloop not having a central location to keep coming back to over and over, interacting with a set of characters that I can grow to appreciate over the course of the game. Technically speaking, Dishonored 2's Dreadful Whale is a hub location, but it's been scaled back so drastically over the Hound Pit's pub that it doesn't even serve the same function anymore, which is not what I want to see happen to Deathloop. I want Arkane to be able to flex their creative storytelling muscle for this game, both in the overarching narrative as well as the little moments. Additionally, I'm hopeful that Arkane avoids using plot conveniences in Deathloop, let alone using them as the crux for the entire story like they did with Dishonored 2. Now that that's out of the way, how is the level design? Given that there's two playable characters in Dishonored 2, Corvo and Emily, each with their own respective set of powers, the level design had to be even more varied than the original game. In my time with Dishonored 2, I chose to play as Emily Kaldwin, since I wanted to try out the new set of powers designed for her. Unfortunately, I ended up spotting what felt like many more opportunities and avenues throughout the game that were designed with Corvo's abilities in mind rather than Emily's. This ultimately led to the design feeling more restrictive and linear than was probably intended. However, there are a handful of levels in which you travel back to Dunwall, which felt much better to move through. Whether that's because of the familiarity of the design after playing the original game so close to playing this one, or if the levels in Karnaca were just poorly laid out in comparison, I walked away from this game feeling that Dishonored 2's level design is at its best when it's emulating Dishonored 1. Not only that, but Emily's far reach power, which should act closely to Blink for Corvo, simply wouldn't work a lot of the time for me. I would spend upwards of 30 seconds lining up where I wanted to go, ensuring that the marker was on the correct piece of level geometry, and would end up either falling just short of my target and falling to my death, or I would get clipped into the object, causing noise and alerting nearby enemies. I know this may not be a widespread issue for all players, but it did persist through the entire experience for me rather than being a small glitch that gets fixed after restarting the game or my PC. Needless to say, I was not as much of a fan of the level design in Dishonored 2 as I was of Dishonored 1, and I hope to see these problems rectified in Deathloop. I'm confident that this issue won't be as prevalent in Deathloop, seeing as the main traversal power is taking more inspiration from Blink than it is from Far Reach. Furthermore, Deathloop will have you playing primarily as Colt, meaning levels can be designed with one power set in mind, rather than spreading itself too thin or ending up lopsided as they did in Dishonored 2. Yes, I'm aware that you can invade other players' games as Juliana, but she shares the same weapons and powers as Colt, eliminating the need to design special routes for her. Next, let's discuss the abilities of Dishonored 2. While playing as Corvo provides players with the same abilities he had in Dishonored 1, playing as Emily offers quite a different combat experience. While much of her abilities are focused on stealth, one standout is Domino. This power allows you to link together several enemies, and when one is either killed or knocked out, the rest go down as well. This was incredibly useful during my stealth run through the game, but is equally useful during outright combat. You could clear an entire room of enemies by winning a sword fight with just one of them. Abilities like this are what I'm so excited to experiment with in Deathloop, and I can't wait to see just how clever Arkane is and how imaginative and crazy the combat scenarios can get. Rather than put Death of the Outsider in a separate part of the video, I'm including it here seeing as it shares much of its DNA with Dishonored 2. However, Death of the Outsider exacerbates the problems I had with Dishonored 2, making for what was, personally, an even less enjoyable experience than the full game. The story is centered around yet another plot convenience which allows the Outsider to be killed. Despite being able to design levels around one specific set of powers for Billy Lurk, they still felt incredibly restrictive, in part due to the limited number of abilities you have. You only have 4 powers in the game. Granted, they all have their own new spin on existing ideas. With that being said, I would have much rathered the game recycle old powers and provide us with more of them, while still keeping it as just one power set overall. This could have provided much more variety in the level design. Once again, there isn't much of a central hub with tons of characters to interact with. While I touched on the abilities in relation to the level design, the more interesting conversation about Billy's powers revolves around their use in combat, of which there isn't much. 3 of the 4 powers are geared more towards stealth, which is incredibly puzzling given that Death of the Outsider touted the fact that there was no morality system in the game. So now you have a Dishonored game without a morality system, which is strange in and of itself, but it does allow players to go hog wild and cause chaos as they please. But now the powers you have are nearly useless in outright combat. The smarter decision here would have been to design the powers with combat in mind so that players could take full advantage of the fact that there is no morality system this time around. Luckily, it seems that Arkane has learned from this mistake, pitching Deathloop as more of a combat-centric experience, and tailoring the powers and tools available respectively. They made a commitment to this playstyle, and it looks as though it will pay off in the gameplay. I believe Prey is the most unique game out of Arkane's lineup, and not just because of the history behind the release of the game itself. While I think it serves as a testament to Arkane's talent as a development studio, being able to successfully revive a long dormant and once thought to be completely lost franchise, I want to take a look at the game through the lens of the previous categories, rather than compare it to what was originally supposed to be Prey 2. From the opening moments of the game, to breaking through your window and setting foot onto Talos 1 for the first time, and everything up until the credits roll on the multiple different endings you can achieve, Prey grabs hold of your attention and never lets go. While in Dishonored you could complete side quests, they never felt quite as important as the main story. However, in Prey, the writing is able to remarkably make every single task feel just as important as the last. The entire space station of Talos 1 is yours to explore so long as you and its other inhabitants can survive the Typhon aliens aboard it, almost making the whole station feel as though it's this one series of connected hubs where you reach different safe spaces and can interact with the survivors there, taking on side and main quests as you go. The level design harkens back to that of Dunwall, making things feel lived in and with purpose to the design, rather than feeling like one large video game level. Talos 1 is a place that exists, where people once lived, studied, worked, and sadly died. Whether you use the glue gun or neuromods, this game's version of powers, to move around, nothing is out of reach if you're creative enough, and that's no easy achievement. It's a place that makes you want to explore every inch of it, despite what may be lurking in the shadows, or perhaps even right in front of you, such as the mimic enemies who can take the shape of any physics object in the game. There are far more powers in Prey than any previous Arkane title, allowing players to experiment and combine them as they please, lending to gameplay experiences so cool that you can't help but go tell someone about it. You begin the game without any powers and slowly build up your arsenal as you progress, which really helps to fulfill the player's power fantasy without shoving all the most obscenely destructive abilities at them all at once. Combat may start off slow, but once you've kitted yourself out with a variety of weapons and powers, you're a force to be reckoned with, which is a progression system I hope to see return in Deathloop. I want to be able to combine my growing knowledge of the world as I engage in more and more loops with my growing arsenal of weapons and abilities. So by the time I'm ready to take out all 8 targets at once, I know I'm going to put up a tough fight and look and feel cool while doing it. I would love to tell you to go out and purchase Deathloop right now. That the game is worth every penny it costs, and even more so worth the time you'll put into it. The fact of the matter is, I have some genuine concerns leading up to the release of this game, as have been detailed throughout the video. Deathloop looks to have all the right pieces, at least from the gameplay shown to us thus far, and I truly believe it could be Arkane's next Dishonored 1 or Prey. But to that same effect, it could turn out like Dishonored 2 or Death of the Outsider. While I know I'm in the minority of players who didn't enjoy those titles, there were foundational changes with them that I couldn't ignore or adjust to in my time with them. You're entitled to feel how you do about them, and I wouldn't want to take away from your personal experience with a game. This is just to say that I'd rather Deathloop turn out more like Prey or the original Dishonored. With that being said, Deathloop isn't out just yet, releasing on September 14th after numerous delays. I could sit here, as many publications will be sure to do, and give it an unjustifiably high score, all in the name of offering validation for those who are early adopters of the PlayStation 5. But I'm not going to do that, because this is not a Deathloop review.
Long enough for all of the big and the small, where the taller they stand, where the harder they fall. We live for today, but we die for the next. With blood in our veins, in the air, and our chest, or we step into war with our hearts on the line. The dirt on our boots, it shakes free over time. The music it fades, the violence slows. The darkness it rises as the sun goes. Love is a distant aroma at best, a withering smile that's stuck deep in your vest. The night air it wraps its fingers around your body, it shakes from a now distant sound. Oh, the sound of her voice, a sweet symphony played over